Ooh, e3. Well, there's not much to do against this. I mean, e3 is not really an opening on its own, so I'm just going to play e5 and... Is this like a hippo? I actually, like, you guys might think this is a waste of a game, but I actually hope that my opponent plays a hippo because guess what? You guys who are like, it's just a hippo. None of you actually know how to beat that opening. And I guarantee if it was played against you by like a strong player, you would look like a clown. So I would actually secretly like to see white play the hippo properly here. Unfortunately, this move is trash, and we're not really playing the hippo anymore. So bishop e2 is not a good sign. It could still somehow work as long as he put that bishop there, maybe. Oh, I'm gonna need to see that one go there like next. That's what I'm thinking. Okay, so bishop e2, like, I guess knight f3 next. Anyway, let's just, you know, develop normally and wait and see what he's intending. Okay. So, knight here, I'm going to choose bishop d6. I like bishop d6 for a few reasons. The first one is if I play e4, takes, I don't want the queens to trade, so that's already nice. I also want it to be aimed here. In case d4 happens, I play e4. And I don't necessarily want to play knight c6 because maybe I want to play pawn c6. White still has an option to like attack the center like this, so I might want to support it. So I'm definitely going to go bishop d6. So, I feel like this position right here is a very good example of a position that I would call an attacking position, but you still need to do things properly. It's not the easiest thing to attack properly without, you know, going crazy and playing something like that. So first of all, if I play e4, takes, whatever, and the knight moves somewhere, the result of that position is that if my pawn were on h5, then bishop h2 would work. Now, I know my pawn is not there, but still, it's just helpful to know these patterns. Like, if my pawn was on h5 here, then e4 would basically win the game. Because I would take on h2, I would give this knight check. If captured, my h-pawn would recapture and open the h-file, and my queen is going to join on h4 and deliver mate on h2, basically. So the game will end. So that's just good to know. And that's always like a forced mate, if the pawn was there. It does not mean that you should play h5 here, because if you play h5 and they play knight d2, great, you're a genius, right? You mate them, woo, congrats. Go you. But if your opponent plays h3, for example, or like just doesn't allow what we just looked at, then h5 is not a great move in your position. So I'm not thrilled by the move h5. Here I'm actually going to start a little bit differently. I'm going to play the move queen e7. Not only do I still keep these ideas alive in the future, but another way to attack is to play this and play e4 and then queen e5. So I'm like clearing the e5 square for my queen. e4 and queen e5. And the only way to cover the h2 square after queen e5 is not h3, it's actually g3. And once I get my opponent to commit to the move g3, then all my attacking moves just flow. Suddenly I have bishop h3 with tempo. suddenly I have h5 that actually makes sense because h4 has a real intention. h5 by itself doesn't do much. So queen e7 kind of intends e4. Now in this position, after knight c3, a great move, definitely a great move, is c6. Stops the knight from going to b5, guards this pawn. But what's going to happen if I play c6, if my opponent's up to task, is they are going to play e4. The knight supports it now. d4 closes everything. You see how my pieces are just blocked by this e-pawn? So I actually can't let e4 happen. So I kind of need to play this move. I must do it. If I don't play this now, all of those attacking whatevers I just talked about, just they don't exist. So e4 is kind of mandatory. Even though c6 is a fantastic looking move, maybe I would play e4 later in that line, whatever. It's not forced, and my opponent could play e4 themselves. So we'll take. We want to evict the knight here. And after the queen gets to e5, white could also play pawn to f4, but for the most part, you always like to see that because you take en passant, and the result is that this pawn is just a weak, isolated pawn. So you're happy to see that too. But let's see, the knight has options. Knight g5 is particularly bad because, okay, h6, and where are you going? h3 is not a good square. Knight e1. Also a particularly bad square. Now, the reason that knight e1 is so special here is because knight e1 is such a bad square that I don't even want to play. Now I'm rethinking. I don't even want to play queen e5 because you know what? After f4, well, I kind of have to take it, and then the knight takes back. So at this point, if white wants to play f4, I don't want my queen to be here and face like I'm just getting tempi thrown in my face. I think the knight is actually trapped now. So he might have to play f4 or like g3 to get the knight out, period. So I no longer want to play a move like this, which will just encourage one of those moves. Does that make sense? If the knight had gone to a good square, then I might be interested in it. But when the knight goes to such a trash square like this, the moves that I previously wanted to see, I now actually am not, like, if they happen, that's good for me still, but I don't want to encourage them. It only helps his knight out. So I'm going to leave that knight there, and I'm going to proceed with a different move. H5 looks like a decent move. I wouldn't say it looks like a great move, mainly because of f4. So we go h5, they go f4. It's like, yes, our position's good, but I'm not sure that it's great. Because if I take and the knight takes, I don't know. This h5 move doesn't help me a ton. But obviously h5 is tempting because takes and knight g4 is about to work. It's a winning idea. So that much is tempting, I'm not going to lie. Here, I think I want to castle ASAP. So I'm really drawn to just knight c6. Just like a simple, totally simple move. Looking at I don't want to castle this way. One thing I'll say for sure is that's the wrong move. I do want to leave this open for stuff like that, but I'd love to get a rook on the same line as the queen there. So I think this is a great move. I also think this is a great move. I'm going to go with knight c6. Because I think if I just make one more move, like bishop f5, my position will be overwhelming. Then we're castling. The rook ends up here. Then h5, then knight there. And you see what I mean? There's that move, f3. So clearly, if I played queen e5, there would be f4. And there's no need for me to deal with that move. But I definitely think h5 there was a high percentage move. After h5, the chances that bishop takes h2 and knight g4 work are very, very high. For example, if our opponent had played this, I believe that would have worked. We just would have played bishop h2 and the game would be over. But objectively, I still feel like somehow the move f4 was good, annoying enough that I didn't want to do it. But h4, h5 there would be fine because our plan is to castle this way. So f3. I think we need to take. That's probably simplest. Let's grab it. It's usually what you're gonna do. Yeah, so the knight returns, and this is exactly why I didn't want to waste time with my queen, because the same thing would have happened. But now I want to place my king on that side of the board. So we need to put this bishop somewhere. Where are we gonna put it? Well, I don't like f5. It looks loose. G4 looks okay. I don't mind G4. E6 feels annoying because it blocks the E file, and D7 feels annoying because it blocks the G file. So it's like, everything feels wrong here. Everything feels like it's in the way. So I'm going to put it all the way out. And my next move is castling. And maybe I'll throw in H5. Pro tip, after you castle, play King B8. If you have a moment, that'll always feel good. Yeah, this is pretty much the next move. At some point, I have been expecting maybe knight b5 to show up, and I would have a choice, like, do I castle and just take it back with the rook, gain more time, or do I hang on to the bishop and play bishop c5? And I think you can probably guess the answer would be to hang on to the bishop. And again, after knight here, I have a choice, but I'm actually a little bit drawn to bishop back. Now, the reason is, okay, I can take here, queen takes back, but there's something a bit frustrating in that position, which is that I don't want to take, but I don't want them to take me, and knight f5 is looming in the position. So this is where I think we take this and we go strangely all the way back to d7. Basically, if I had played knight or bishop d7 initially, then okay, it would be a fine move, but I'm gonna play it now. If knight f5 I want to take, sure. Most important pieces in my position seem to be these ones. And that's the strongest piece for white, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna take. And if the knight takes here, I take back with the bishop. A knight on b5, don't get me wrong, is very frustrating to deal with, and it's even more frustrating here than in the previous position because I can't play this move because the c7 pawn is hit, but I will put the bishop on e5, let's say here or here, either way, and I'm playing a castle like next turn. But I definitely don't want to exchange because this square is weaker, this square is weaker, so I want to actually cover both of them. Important to point out that, like, you know, if I had played bishop d7, I did not like knight b5, because then what do I do with this bishop? If I play bishop there, I lose the pawn. It's not defended. If I play bishop there, well, the knight just takes it. So I kind of did this so that now if knight b5, I have a square for my bishop. It's kind of hard to explain, but now, for example, I can play this. And this bishop covers. And if he wants to go here, he will definitely win my bishop, but then he will have invested possibly the maximum amount of moves to take one bishop. Like, he'll have played knight here, knight here, knight here, knight here. It's like 4 moves to take the bishop, which I think would be worth it. And then we get castled, and immediately we'll have a threat against the queen. How do you decide whether to put the queen on d7 or e7 when developing? Well, I can say for the most part in chess that there are other squares your queen can go to, but if it's only between those two squares, I mean, if your bishop is on c1 or c8, then you would never, ever choose d2 or d7 for the most part. So there's one rule right there. Yeah, so he did do what I was talking about. He's going to win my bishop here, but I get to castle and immediately make some noticeable threats. So let's get castle on this side of the board. Wow, thank you for the massive, massive reset. How do I know it's massive? Well, that's boobs and jeans. Has to be big. Thank you for the prime reset. He really wants the bishop, I know. Really wants the bishop, but that's fine. Multiple moves invested. You just started playing chess a week ago and you've been watching the Building Habits video. Well, thank you. Thank you. That's nice to hear. I like how you didn't include whether or not they've been helping, because, you know, we don't need to include that in the testimonial. The point is you've been watching. That's what really matters. Which piece am I going to take back with? And you figured it out? Well, then can I ask you, which piece am I going to take back with? The queen, because the knight defends a7. That is a very, very correct analysis. So if your analysis was so good and so correct, why did I feel like taking this way? Just to stir the pot or what? Knight takes e5, knight takes a7, king b8, knight b5, bishop b5. That's right. Knight b5 is not possible. And what was my knight doing on c6? Not too much, right? So I definitely think the e5 square is a big improvement for my piece. Knight a7. Oops. Oh. Gosh darn it. He saw that trickarooski. Dropped a7. Damn. Well, now he's got an important decision. So, queen d4. Interesting move. There are many, many reasons why this is not good for white. Curious what you guys think is the best way that black could play. There are probably a lot of right answers here, by the way. I'm not even... yeah, there's probably so many reasons why this is not good. So, if your answer is not necessarily the one I decide to play, I wouldn't even feel bad. It might be even stronger than what I'm going to play. There's just too many options. So c5 hits the queen and literally wins the knight. That's clear. Because there's no queen a4. This is a direct attack on the queen, and I can directly take that. The other thing I could do is I could play bishop here, which hits this. And to me, this is not as interesting of an option because at least I give my opponent the chance to play knight takes and then knight takes here. And I don't like even a lot. I don't even like offering that. Don't even like offering that. 2 pieces plus a pawn for the queen. It's like, when I could win a whole piece right here, that's not attractive. The other thing, though, that I could do is I could move this bishop to g4. And that would hit the bishop and hit the queen. And if the bishop took back, then I could take the queen and take the bishop. So it would only be a rook for a queen. That's pretty nice. That's pretty nice. Don't forget, at the end of a lot of these lines, this knight might get trapped anyway. So I'm between these two moves, and bishop here, I don't know, queen a4, like only move to keep this knight defended. Bishop takes on e2, knight b5, maybe, a little bit tricky of a move. You know, I could just play bishop takes. So the real question is, like, do I want to play this, or do I want to simplify a piece off the board? And honestly, it's kind of a tough choice, but I think I'm going to make the call that we want to simplify, and I'm going to go here. c5 to me wins the knight, but I'm not a big fan of the fact that, you know, maybe I might have to face a move like queen c3, king a7, like check, king back, and then some garbage like e4. And the bishop comes to f4, and I've got this wide open diagonal, my king. It's like, obviously black's winning. There's no debating that, but I just don't like how open my king is. So if I can leave my pawns nice and safe, nice and secure, and just win a piece for nothing, then I'll be happy with that. So I'm trying to choose the path forward that keeps my king the safest, basically. But we may even get to analysis and learn that c5 might have even been a better move than bishop g4, or even if it was maybe not as good, you know, it's certainly worthwhile to play. So that's why I said don't worry if like this move wasn't the one you were thinking, because c5 is a tremendously good move. Obviously here he hasn't even taken into account that the queen is hanging, so it certainly worked. We can definitely say that. So I think we have to start by taking this. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to take that, so let's get the easy move out of the way. And what's the material here? So if I take and then just take, I'm up a queen for a rook, I think. Like, I'm gonna lose this knight. If I take and play knight f3 check, it looks really good, but there is some nonsense with king f2 guarding the rook, you know what I mean? It's like, is that actually good? Is that actually good? Maybe we can go for a try-hard move. Queen b4, hitting the rook. and then intending to take. Queen b4, c3, queen b6, pinning the pawn. Obviously, that's way too much. It's far too complicated. I tell you what I am gonna probably play though is knight d3. That move looks very simple. Takes, just take, and let's like nothing can go wrong there. I tell you, the more I look at this, the more I like it. That's not a good sign. All right, for the home team, queen b4. I think it's good. I think this is a genius moment. We're having a genius moment. c3, queen b6, and you can't take my knight, and you know, takes might happen, but then you're dropping this knight, and my point is at the end of that line, I wouldn't just be have a rook, I'd be have a rook, or a rook for queen, and I would have a knight. And of course, knight b5 could be played. And then I was thinking, okay, take, rook takes, and then I have a move to play. I have a knight move that I can play. Right? Not only is this guy hanging, but my knight can go somewhere. Okay, he plays bishop e3. Notice how, in this position, we can take the bishop if he takes, so that's not really a threat. So I can grab this knight with either one of these. If the bishop takes here, then we take. We actually end up more material than before. So our master plan here has actually worked out. Go me. Worked out nicely. So I think we just take this. Not sure which one to take it with, honestly. Should be the queen. You don't want to put your king there and have to worry about that. So probably the queen. Let's do this. Could have also taken and played knight somewhere, but this makes a point, you know? It's like, oh, that's how bad your last move was. It doesn't even threaten anything. Yeah, I was thinking of king takes, guys, but I didn't like bishop f2. And then I feel like I'm being hit left, right, and center. Wow, I played that move a little quickly. Maybe other knight takes g4 was better. Blunder, bro. Knight takes g4 inaccuracy. The other knight was definitely much better with this knight coming into like d3 or something. So, major blunder alert there. Let's attack the bishop. That's friendly. And the remaining pieces are very much in my favor. Queen and knight for a rook. We can offer trades here. We don't want to offer too many trades, because I tell you, if a rook gets down here, that's actually checkmate. And it would be the most embarrassing kind of checkmate to allow. The most embarrassing. Where your queen is like blocking your king. It's nothing worse than that. What do we do here? What to do here? We'll play c5 and try to open up this diagonal. Yeah, the queen is inactive, which is kind of why I played the move I just did. So we can take right away, but I think because the rook is on a square like this, that we should use this moment to actually do something like that. Okay, I'll hit the rook. I suspect rook d1 needs to happen. And then rook d8 should put enough pressure on that knight. Okay, yeah, rook here, but now we'll take. And this queen finally joins the game. Pawn takes, queen takes, and yeah, although rook there is tricky, it's not tricky enough. We have d3 check. And rook e3 to block, but now I think d2 will set up the eventual win of something, because this rook is hit, and this rook now has two jobs. It needs to stop the pawn from queening, but it also needs to defend this rook. So it's overworked, essentially. Well, the thing is, if I take this, actually the rook has to, well, if the rook takes back, we have mate in one with queen f2. If the king takes, then the rook hangs. So this is definitely the way to go, I believe. You take here. If the rook takes, we would play knight d2 mate. If the king takes, I'm hoping for this one, but ultimately it's probably going to be that one, and we'll mate with the queen. GG. GG. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. All right. So, yeah, it's just not really an opening. Like, e3 is a book move. Like, what book? Let's see the book. Someone show me the book. Okay, so, yeah, basically, I think h5 is a pattern everyone should know. So, this position right here is like the most important position. Knight e1 and h5, not the best move for sure, but the likelihood that you get a mate is so high. So high. If white does nothing, whatever, like a move like this, the point is that bishop h2, king takes h2, knight g4, king g1, right? Queen h4. And this is one of the most standard mating patterns you'll ever come across. Bishop captures the knight as they realize the only way to stop mate is to bring the knight there. And now they realize the only escape square they can make is this one. But then you hit them with g3, and now the game truly ends. So this is just a good mating pattern to know. It's very common. It happens literally all the time. People often think they're safe here because they calculate like check, and then they're like, oh, I'll run away. You never get away. Same here. If you take like that, then I take this way, check, king back, queen here, threatening mate. Again, you move your f pawn and the same thing happens. g3. So that's why this h pawn can be quite nice. Now, imagine that white had gone to a different square. had gone to d4. Okay? Now again, h4 not the best move. Still a good move, not the best. And again, imagine like just a whatever move, just to show you once more. Bishop h2, king h2, knight g4, king there, queen h4, and knight f3 is not possible, right? Knight f3, we just take, and obviously we're going down to h2 next turn. So, the only other way that you could dream about stopping mate would be taking the knight or moving the rook. Now, if you take the knight, the same thing is going to happen that we just looked at, where just this takes away the square, and that's mate. If you move the rook, you're getting mated. It doesn't help. If you move the rook now, you're getting mated because your own bishop blocks the escape square. Okay? So now let's look at what if white played not only a good knight move, but after h5 also made this random bishop move. So now I would play bishop h2, knight g4. Let's say the king goes back. Of course, you have to know what happens if the king goes up in all these lines, but that's another story. Queen h4, we want to mate. But now white says, oh, I'll go here. Because now if you check me and check me, I'll run away, and I'm running to eventual safety. Like, there won't be a checkmate here. So whenever someone does this, it's still mate, but you must take this one. Take this one first, and now you can pre-move the whole mate. Based on the arrangement of pieces, it'll almost always be mate, but you take this, this is forced, you check, this is forced, you check, this is forced, you check, this is forced, and it's the exact same position that we just looked at, except there's no pawn here. So now it's mate. And you might think, oh, it's like only working because of the way these pieces are. It's like, no, that's the way the pieces almost always are when you do the sack, so it will almost always work. So we've looked at like 4 or 5 different ways that this sack always works. It works well if the knight's on e1, the rook can't move. If the knight's on a better square, it still works because the bishop's in the way of the king escaping. If the bishop's out of the way, it still works because even though the rook moves out of the way, you take the other pawn and you mate him no matter what. So you've basically seen every single possible way that this could lead to mate, and it all comes from h5. Now, that being said, h5 is not the type of move that you can just play and it's like a great move, like, wow, love h5. It's good, and you'll see the engine still likes black's position, so it's good to know about this stuff, but it's not the best move, which is why I saw knight there, and I thought, okay, I'll just play knight c6. This move looks normal. I want a castle. Castling kingside is fine here, but I firmly believe that we want to castle queenside in this position. No question about it. Okay, knight there. Bishop d7. I like bishop d7. I think it's a very strong move here. I also think in this position, I think it's extremely difficult to know that one of the best continuations for black is bishop g4 and bishop back to d7. Certainly very, very strange. Like, I could play bishop f5, but you'll quickly see that the engine just won't like it as much because you're moving and it just doesn't make sense. Bishop e6, you'll also notice the engine won't like as much because you're blocking your queen. And bishop d7, the engine will hate because of knight b5, which is what I mentioned. Now your bishop is dead. And white only had to invest 1 move to get it. So the only square available is this one. And the idea being that after knight d4, surprisingly, we actually want to go back. And as I mentioned in the game, although this move hits us, now we have the e5 square because we wasted time by moving our bishop twice. So although we lose our bishop, we get to long castle, and after takes, knight takes back, which is just an improvement because white can't take this, even though white did take this and immediately lost. Now here, again, c5, it's a great move, right? I'm curious what line the engine's going to spit out. It was what I was talking about. Queen c3, okay, makes sense. This is exactly what I was saying. Queen c3, And I thought that I was winning here, but I just, once again, didn't trust e4. And it's like, why am I dealing with this? Why am I dealing with this? I don't need to be. So c5 is a fantastic move, but bishop g4 is definitely the best because I get to take the knight on safer terms. Safer terms. And after being down material, well, my opponent didn't even save the queen. Obviously, it was lost. So let's investigate this queen b4 move. Obviously, I knew that there's no way it was a good move. So what did we miss? What was the line? Queen b4, c3, queen b6. All right, let's see the genius. Bishop f1, Chad. Wow. Bishop f1, Chad. Yeah, bishop f1's a good move. I tell you, bishop f1 looks like a good one. Now, why is bishop f4 a good move? No, this doesn't make sense. Now I get the knight. This is what I wanted. So actually, the only move that white has is bishop f1 to save the knight, right? Okay, so we missed bishop f1. That's a strong move. Hits the knight and maintains b5. Ah, foiled by the old silicone engine. Shout out to boobs and jeans. Hello, Asios. How are you, buddy? But okay, I still think, even though this wasn't a real opening, it's still nice to see how you can win these positions, and like just when is a good moment to play e4. I definitely liked playing e4 when I did to force the pieces back and not let my opponent play e4 as well.